Good evening, people, and welcome to our Facebook live broadcasting. I'm very glad to expect you. Not that I see you now. Hey, Maze. So I'm very glad to expect you, and very soon we will see who is joining in for today's lecture about Carl Gustav Jung. Hello, number one. Hello, Punktlich. You came right in time. Jung, the arts, and what these have to do with coaching. It's amazing how one becomes 11. So, welcome, people. I'm very glad to have you. And now we are waiting a couple more minutes to start our live lecture. I'm really honored and flattered for having a plentitude of listeners. Hello, Moitza. Good evening. And maybe I can learn to roll down and see who else is joining. No, well, unless you write to me a word, I don't know that you exist. Yeah. So, Timea, Heron, I don't know you, but I'm so glad you joined in and you're so welcome. Good evening to you. Where are you from? Timea Maurits Hirn. Might be German or welcome anyway. And Greta for Hessen. Hello. Um, and who else is joining us this evening? Um, Today I will be reading to you beautiful texts from Jung himself and post-Jungians, and I will interweave the writings about art in the Jungian literature, and slowly we will arrive to the application of these ideas to a vigorous, creative coaching. Um, in the last few years, I'm involved in teaching the Jungian coaching, and I see other disciplines of coaching. And I think that the contribution of the unconscious, according to Jung, is granting precious, beautiful aspects of coaching experiences to our coachees. So, waiting a couple more minutes, and I see people are coming and joining us, and I'm very grateful for that. And I am the Expressive Art Therapy Education first year. Aha, welcome. And welcome, dear Yanya. We're going to meet on the 12th of February. We still have very few places for our class on the international program. We targeted 16 people and we are almost reaching it. So those of you who want to step on the wisdom train of the sixth module of the international coaching program that starts on February 12th, just write us a mail and our head of office, Tanya, will contact you. And Kalispera Sas Angeliki Durbani and Drubani and Danica is here, so almost we can start. And I'm so glad to see nice known people. So I think it's no, my clock is gonna the horloge is going to click 8 times, and then I will start. So once again in the menu, some Jungian texts with my explanations, and thereafter how it corresponds to creative coaching. As I wrote in the summary of this evening lecture, understanding art before Jung was totally different to the understanding of art. And when I say arts, I mean also movement and also music after the Jungian psychology spread in the world. I don't know how many of you know, for example, that Hitchcock was influenced directly from Jung, and same with composers and dancers. And my clock says that we can really start. Lately, in the late evenings, I'm using the YouTube and I'm reading systematically the Red Book of Jung that was written in 1913 till 1915. In 1957, he is editing it, but does not let it publish until 50 years later, because this material is extremely condensed and, as Jung is Jung, quite provocative. Um, and those of you who are acquainted with the Red Book, you will not be surprised, but Jung is painting there a whole collection of mandalas, and he is writing with uh, his own handwriting, um, in calligraphy. He's writing his ideas that were later on. Hold on a second, one more picture I think is worth having. For example, this one, or this one, which is very known, or this one. So I collected a few quotations from Jung to bring to you the deep belief and understanding that the human being's psyche is directly connected to images. Now, those of you who know a bit about Jung's biography, he built with his own two hands a house where he spent weekends and time for meditation and for reflections in Kustnacht, which is a small village by the Lake of Geneva. No electricity, and they claim that he spent most of the valuable hours with Marie von Franz, his preferred student, that became by herself a discipline in Jungian psychology. In this house, he used to walk along, and there are movies that show it, along the lake, grabbing with his walking stick lines of water from the lake and playing with the water mini channels to meditate and reflect and organize his psyche. Jung himself and the post-Jungians recommend for people who do Jungian analysis to occupy themselves on regular basis with creating art, not for the benefit of scholarship or being professionals, but for massaging the psyche and enabling a channel from the unconscious out. Jung himself encouraged his students and disciples to develop artistic talents and artistical techniques in order to connect to the psyche. One of them, for example, is Dora Kalf. This book is very ancient. I think it's from the first editory, and she developed the Jungian century therapy um, as a way of art. People are coming to the studio. They have a huge variety of little miniatures. They create their own century, and you read their psyche. Actually, the dream analysis that Jung developed is stepping far beyond the dream analysis of Freud. and turned in Jungian psychology to a very basic practice in Jungian analysis. In my country, very known is Lenore Steinhardt with foundation and form in Jungian century, and there is a whole collection of that. I will read some paragraphs also from the book of Erich Neumann. Erich Neumann was the preferred student of Jung, who immigrated to Israel in 1935 in Palestine at that time. He wrote this book, Art and the Creative Unconscious. This is an amazing book that in this book there is an analysis of Leonardo da Vinci's picture of Maria, the mother and the baby, of Marc Chagall. Amazing book to understand the connection between art, the unconscious, and the archetypes. In addition, a leading personality in the post-Jungian is Verena Kast, that I quote a lot in my coming book, and she writes about the dynamic of symbols. A fantastic work that was done with children who suffer of cancer is Greg Fair's the known book, The Secrets of World of Drawing, which is based on Jungian knowledge, with a preface of Margaret Kobler-Ross, who is a psychiatrist, may she rest in peace, that spoke about elaborating of loss and death. And there is this Jungian art therapy, a guide for dreams, images, and analytical by Nora Swan Foster. I just gave you a sample, a tiny sample of so many books that were written under the inspiration of Jung that discovered the secret and enchanted tunnel between the creative unconscious and the psyche and the human being. Now, when you read the Red Book, in the beginning, Jung doesn't name the concept self. He speaks about the inner God inside each one of us, or he calls it depth. And this is why we call Jungian psychology depth psychology. And the book is divided into small chapters. And the first chapter is the way of what is to come, the way of what is to come. And I quote Jung, I speak in images, said the God, the internal God, the internal self, the internal depths. I speak in images. With nothing else can I express the works from the depths, which means the unconscious is working, and the production of the work of the unconscious comes out to the conscious level, to our awareness, to our conscious mind through images. You might ask me why people do not report if this is working so currently, why people don't report about images. First of all, the Western and culture suppressed the visual images, starting with Judaism, that in the Ten Commandments it says, "Thou shalt not do an image of God up above the sky, under the ground, or under the water." It continues with Islam that prohibited drawings. And if you go to mosques in Turkey or all over, you will see calligraphy of Muslim, of Arabic letters, but not images. And if you look at the lithography or the Christian art, it is very much restricted to saints and episodes from the Holy Bible. So free art, free association, hallucinations, imaginative art is prohibited. And one of the amazing works that show the flow of images is Hieronymus Bush art, but that was confidential and in secret. So up until the 20th century or maybe the Renaissance, we don't have free images coming in flow, and this influences the people's daily life. Nowadays, with the industry of movies that Jung contributed a lot to, and with the modern museums, and with the print that was developed, and more now on the internet, we are more connected to images, we are more connected to collective images, and we are more fond of the visuals. Another chapter of the Red Book is called Refining the Soul, and I quote Jung: "He who possesses the world but not its image possesses only half the world. Since his soul is poor and has nothing, the wealth, the richness, the wealth of the soul exists in the images." Here I want to do a footnote for coaching. What soul has to do with a coachee? People who come for coaching want to discover either innovative ideas, new path for their career, an exit or burst out or fulfillment of a dream, of a wish. They want to become who they want to become. And here Jung tells us that the passport for your coach's development lies in opening a door to the images of the client's unconscious. When Jung writes about in the chapter of Soul and God in the Red Book, he writes, "I am as I am in this visible world, a symbol of my soul." Very soon I will speak about symbolism because images and symbols are interwoven in the language of the unconscious. And then, provocatively, quite astonishing, Jung goes into a chapter that he calls him the desert, this chapter. And surprisingly, he says that the unconscious is desert. But I keep lecturing to you all the time, how come the unconscious is a huge reservoir of creative contents that wish to be born on the conscious level. So what has this to do with the desert? So Jung is a trickster, and look what he says. Wherever the creative power is, there springs the soil's own seed. Which means if you are creative, it's guarantee that you will have green seed. If your creative force now turns to the place of the soul, you will see how your soul becomes green and how its field bears wonderful fruit. Which means that in the preliminary, in the onset, in the startup of diving into the unconscious, very likely you will see desert. And you need faith, or in Jungian terms, in coaching terms, persistency, to knock on this door until the desert will open you a seed. I want to encourage you to send me questions, because what I started to like in these evenings is that I have a preliminary plan, but when you start contributing with your comments and questions, It is like a kaleidoscope of a brainstorming, and it really enriches our dialogue. So maybe I will ask you an open question. Think, if you are coaches, where did you get stuck in the coaching process with your client and you felt desert? Now, let me quote to you maybe one or two paragraphs from Erich Neumann, what he writes about the creative artist. Because a person who is creative slash an artist, according to the Jungian psychologist, is a person that has a role in society. I will tell you briefly what is the idea. According to Erich Neumann, the Jungian, an artist, it doesn't matter if it's a lady or a man, they are connected to their anima, or the woman to her femininity, to her intuition, to her imagination, to the irrational. Think about the greatest arts. Think about Almodovar. Think about Marc Chagall. Think about Picasso. All those great artists, their material was irrational. It's not logical to see a couple, married couple, flying in the sky. So here is what Erich Neumann says. Normal Western development, which for this reason we call patriarchal, the father principle, leads to a dominance of conscious or of the father archetype, and to an extensive repression and inhibition of the unconscious, putting down, inhibiting, repressing, putting down the unconscious, and the related mother archetype, which means most our clients are an outcome of an indoctrination of the patriarch. Think, this is what our schools teach the pupils. Think, infer, be logical. Hear what Erich Neumann says. But in the creative man, and to a considerable degree in the neurotic, this is all of us, this reduction of the archetypal tension between the first parents is impossible and incomplete. What does this have to do with coaching? When your client knocks on your office and pays you your fee, your client is expecting you to offer techniques to balance the masculine, cognitive, logical, decision making, problem solving, and mix it with irrational ideas. Now, let me tell you something. In the last few years, I visited many offices of colleagues who are coaches. I made a transformation and I turned from a clinical psychologist and expressive therapist into a coach. So I found myself in many, many coaching offices. And what do I see there? The mindfulness atelier. You know, this aroma that is coming from a little machine that is giving the smell, or a shanty and so on. Beautiful colors, pastel. This is an unconscious or maybe a deliberate intention to bring feminine components into the milieu. But why am I being a bit cynical? Because as a Jungian coach, I expect that it will not end in the persona. It will not end in the environment. That there will be also an understanding from the side of the coach that when you seriously deal with problem solving or looking at innovative ideas, you have to dwell in the unconscious. I want to share with you a personal experience from the co-active CTI coaching program that I graduated. I don't remember, it was maybe the second module. We studied balance. And in balancing, the idea is to pull out the coachee from a rigid, stagnated point of view and to open other points of view. And guess what? By doing it physically, the coach says to the coachee, okay, you tell me your topic, and now close your eyes. What do you see? Give me an image. So the guy says, I see a locomotor. Then you grab him to another position and you say, what do you see in here? And you are doing a kaleidoscope of images that the client is connecting to. And for sure, the unconscious will produce antagonistic images. Why? Not because the coach is creative, because the psyche is built from polarities. And if you saw a locomotor on a one position, very likely you will see on the other side an eagle or a pigeon. That the psyche needs to balance. And this is how we use, this is very, very important what I say. We need in coaching to use the imaginative, fictional, creative potential of the unconscious. Says Erich Neumann, in the life of the creative man, the emphasis always lies on the transpersonal factors. That is to say, in his experience, the archetypal factors is so predominant that the extreme cases he becomes almost incapable of personal relationship, which means when you are very much connected to the unconscious, your interpersonal relationship are difficult because you're very much connected to your internal world. Now, let me see. Hello, Eva Feldman from Portugal. Love to you too. And Danica says, I felt desert with every rational client. They dislike both any kind of Jungian coaching tool or working without material. How to deal with such brain clients? Well, because Danica lives in Slovenia, there are serious people, and the unconscious loves humor. So maybe you have to adopt a caricature or um, allow yourself to reflect to your coachee. What images come up in your mind? You see, this is a catch. By the way, I'm so honored and grateful. 72 people are observing the lecture and show curiosity. Gracias a la vida. Now, here is the catch and the challenge. Ladies and gentlemen, if you are not artistic, how do you expect your client to use imagination? If you are logical, so if I go back to my dear friend Danica, if the guy speaks and you feel desert, you have to say, dear Igor, I close my eyes and I see desert. Join into the desert. What are you saying, Danny?
Love you.
You like it? Yeah. If you are afraid of your own desert, and if you are afraid to reveal your insight, that right while you're talking about this dilemma, I see desert. What do you see? If you are afraid to jump into the unconscious and swim and dive, don't expect the client to do it. And this reminds me, if I didn't tell you up until now, the Jewish Hasidic legend about the great rabbi that arrived to a small village, and there was a local rabbi with a psychotic child. And this psychotic child, he believed that he is in German it's Hindik, that he is a turkey, the bird. And he was sitting under the table naked. And people approached the great rabbi and said to the great rabbi of Breslev, he was real saint, and they said to him, Rabbi, can you help please the son of the local rabbi? He really believes that he's a Hindik. And the great rabbi said, get away, everybody, from the house. I will stay alone with this young man. He was 13, 14, 15 years old. And this great rabbi disnuded himself and sat naked under the table and said to this guy, you are a Hindik, I'm a Hindik. You eat pieces of bread, I eat pieces of bread, but a Jew can say a blessing to the bread. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam hamotzi lechem min haaretz. He eats, and the Hindik starts eating and blessing. Then he says, you are a Hindik, I'm a Hindik, but we can put our prayer shawl, right? The tefillin and how do you call it? The ah, it's the shawl. This is a great shadow that came into my lecture, and the great shadow says, "How dare you bring your unconscious folklore to international students? I will." And you put talit. It's called talit. So he put a talit and the guy put a talit. And the idea is that you have to go down to your client and bring your client up with you. You have to go down to the unconscious, to the irrational, to the creative, and step out slowly and slowly. Clear, more questions? Please, more questions. Thank you for sharing your knowledge. It's very interesting. Thank you. Yeah, prayer scarf, but in Hebrew it's talit. And please ask more question. I'm urging you. And yeah. So the previous question, Michal Bialik, you get a hug from the Galilee. I know you're a great fond of the Jungian psychology. Um, Another leading question. Can you be, please, Dr. Goren Bar, practical and give us some basic techniques how to produce art in a coaching session? So let's get for that, and then we will dive again into theory. When because of Corona, not most, all my coaching and therapeutic sessions are held on Zoom. And there is a prejudice that on Zoom, you cannot be creative. And this is such bullshit. I just now spent the last weekend with my expressive art therapy group in Belgrade. They graduated 2 years. Most of the studies were on Zoom, and they did presentations, 15-minute presentation, personal presentation. Unbelievable how creative and how heart-touching and courageous it was. So please set aside the obstacles, the logical obstacles, the conscious obstacles of it's not practical, and please, let's be crazy, let's be unconscious. Ask your client or send them a mail to have nearby them crayons, markers, glue, masking tape, scissors, we call it here Japanese knife, A4 paper, beaucoup de journaux, a lot of journals. I will tell you soon why journals. Oil colors and plastilina. I wish they would also have clay, but plastilina is good as well. Now, you will tell me engineers, executives, owners of corporations, shareholders. Yes. If you trust the process, if you believe in the unconscious, you don't expect them to produce art in the criteria of Guggenheim Museum. You want them to close their eyes, see an image, and draw something that reminds them. Why? And this is a very, very important point. And I'm speaking out of 40 years of experience. I'm definitely sure about it. If we go back to Jung's wisdom, And if we understand that the image is a sign from the unconscious self, it's like a blurred dream. It does not need to be aesthetics or beautiful. It can simply be a gesture. But when your client is processing to arrange a sketch or a drawing or any artifact, two wonderful processes happen at the same time. And for this, I will take my draft of my book. I just got an email from Routledge Publishing House that my book, Introduction to Jungian Coaching, will come in the early spring. By next week, I will get the footnote, the foothead, and correct it, and we will go on. But I really want to show you the idea of aesthetic distancing that I will share with you now, just a graph from the book, and before that, a little story. When I was in my career to become an expressive therapy, I had several resurrections in my 68 years. First, I was a educational psychologist. Then I became a Gestalt therapist. Then I turned into expressive therapist. Then I studied Jungian studies and finished the 3 years Jerusalem Jungian school. And then I did a PhD on object relations, and etc. etc. One summer, I was in Bologna, and I was fortunate enough to have a workshop, intensive week, with Arthur Robbins. That I heard recently that he's an old, amazing guy living in New York. He's a psychoanalyst and an art therapist. And he wrote several books. And in the book about aesthetics and psychoanalysis, he speaks about aesthetic distancing. And let me explain. Look at this. You see, when the client comes to coaching, he expects to find a solution to his dilemma. If you want the client to dive into the unconscious, you ask the client to express the dilemma in artistic manner. And in this arrow where the client is going deep into the artwork, two phenomena happen. One, the client is stepping on the 6 stages of what I developed, which is called the creation axis. Every creative activity, cooking a cake, writing a poem, creating a sculpture, writing a musical piece, any creative process can be divided into 6 stages. Contact with the material, organization, you organize yourself, improvisation, this is where the unconscious is coming in the picture, main theme, variation, elaboration, and ending, preservation. So even if the client did a little scribble, he crushed the creation axis. And while doing that, he's diving with the elevator to his unconscious. There is always a discrepancy, ladies and gentlemen, between what you had in mind to paint or draw and what came out. There is always discrepancy between what you look in the journal and what you find and what you pick up finally. And this discrepancy holds the secret from the unconscious. So this is a technique. Use the aesthetic distancing. Don't rush to analyze the dilemma of the client. Simply say to your client, can you, before we go into our techniques, into our interview, draw, and don't give too much time. The unconscious, this is very precious what I tell you. Our unconscious doesn't need time. The conscious level needs time. When you choose a jewelry or a dress, you don't spend a week. You pick up some items, you go to the dressing room. If there is pressure, not like today, you pick it up from the unconscious. You think that the conscious level is involved, but the unconscious makes the punchline. So, Ageliki, Arapimeni, Kalispera says, if we are the one that give the image of the coach's dilemma, if we are the ones, aren't we leading him somehow? Aren't we restricting his unconscious? But my God, maybe I didn't express myself well. Never ever do I tell you to bring your own image to the client. I said, ask your client to close his eyes and tell you what he sees, or put music and ask him to move. And if he sees an image, to stop and share with you what he or she sees. In the Jungian Coaching Kit, the one that we are providing for you in your studies, break it, February 12th, first generation of International Jungian Coaching School, students from San Francisco, Los Angeles, Amsterdam, Ukraine, Bratislava, other countries that I don't remember are joining together, and this is your time to decide to go on this train. And we are having a wonderful team of assistants that will work in the breaking rooms, and these assistants also mentor personally each one of the students in between modules, and I'm teaching the whole modules. So the Jungian Coaching Kit is offering the coachee cards that have images and visuals, but the association is the coachee, not the coach. So I hope I clarified myself. This one I answered. Eva, more how to unlock the desert. Well, a little marijuana, a little mushrooms, a little, you are in Portugal. What do you drink there? Tsipuro, you don't drink. Rake, you don't drink. I don't know what you drink in Portugal. Porto. A lot of Porto. Uh, easing. Easing. In my doctorate, I speak about Christopher Bola's concept mood. You have to bring your client into a mood. And this can be physical exercise. Jump a bit. Accelerate the blood pressure. Go out and walk in the wood with your client. Let me tell you about this was not coaching, that was therapy, but the session had the flavor of coaching, and it is a real story. As most of you know by now, I live in the Galilee in my private house, and it has a beautiful garden. And I got a client, and she came to me for the first session, and she says, Avi, my husband and you are the first people that know I have a breast cancer. And I'm shocked. I mean, I knew this woman very slightly, and my own sister died of cancer years ago, and I'm shocked. And I tell her, listen, my dear, I can't breathe. Let's go out to the garden and walk. And we start walking, and I ask her, while we walk, pick up 3 objects that are associating to your disease. And my house is built, the floor is built out of wood, out of stone. Maybe you will see. You can see the stone here very nicely. And there are leftover of the stone in the backyard. So she picks a stone. And then I have an agave plant. So she cuts a piece of the agave. And then, because it was still cold, I am lazy to throw the ashes of the stove behind or across the street. So there was a pile of dead ashes. And these 3 items she takes inside my house for this session. And because I'm Gestalt therapist and I believe in activating the images, I tell her to let these objects speak. Now, to make a long, deep, fantastic coaching session, the stones symbolized her grave, the ashes, her disease, and the agava, the cure. Mind you, that the stone and the burned wood are a solid material, while the agava is a photosynthesis vivid plant. And of course, the agava, out of her choice, won the dialogue. The agava said, I will cure her. It's not her time. So, what did I do? I mediated objects that she chose to the unconscious. So, creating art and using art, that is to say, you can nowadays find lots of pictures of famous artists, and you don't need Osho cards, and you don't necessarily need point of view. Not that I'm against it, but if you use famous artists' art, clients can associate on these arts. And I will give you another tip. In art, and this I learned from Greg Thurs, I like to mention where I learned what. So Greg Thurs in this book, he has chapter 4, and in chapter 4, he's analyzing drawings systematically of children who are fighting cancer. And he goes one by one with the pictures and analyzes. And what does he say? He says that the marginal, let me see if I can point it out. Yeah, here. That the marginal, you see here the little line here. The marginals reveal the most important, powerful psychic message. You can write it down in green. The marginal, the smallest. This is why in this Christian Andersen, the king is naked. It's the little child that shouts, "Hey, the king is naked." So the little marginal, the one that is the tip of the tongue, is your clue for the coaching. And Markela says, and playfulness. And playfulness. So it occurs to me now that you say playfulness, have some games. I don't know how you call it in English, these little sticks that it's called duk here, that you can throw and play. Don't play cognitive chess, don't play chess, but play games that are funny, that are really playful. I know that people use colors. I know that people, but it doesn't matter. It's all working on the same mechanism of projection from the unconscious. So, ladies and gentlemen, what has art to do with Jung? Art is the language of Jung's unconscious. What unconscious and art have to do with coaching? It's your rescue from being stuck with your coachee. It's your chance to innovate and bring fantastic material to the coaching dialogue. And you will benefit because if you want to be artistic, you have to connect to your anima or to your femininity. Thank you so much for your appearance. We are holding another, are we? Yes, another Monday Facebook Live. It will be on femininity, anima, and coaching. And later we will make a small pause, and I will continue on the basis, I think, of a once a month, trying obviously not to repeat myself, but go beyond. One of my dreams is to analyze Netflix series. I'm dying to analyze Vikings. I'm dying to analyze the Turkish series about the psychiatrist and the covered young woman. I forgot the name. I am a freak of Borgen, the Danish prime minister, and I think that Yavash Yavash, Siga Siga, Polako Polako, slowly, slowly, I get to understand that I have a job that is beyond creating schools. I think my job is to mediate Jungian wisdom to everybody as much as I can, and as long as I have enthusiasm, and I bet I still have. So, welcome to my house. Welcome to my wisdom. Eva says yes, and Maria Borkovich says thank you. And Danica, I will embrace you. And Stella Rapti, great, cannot wait. And Elizabeth Alkovich, kako si, dragaya moj. Regards, I miss you. Bye bye, everybody. Have a nice evening.